Okay, I'll fade this out because we're going to start in a couple seconds. Give the Chicago.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? And I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
Now, live from Chicago, the Hal Sparks radio program Mega Worldwide.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass.
Hal Sparks, actor, comedian, and multimedia personality.
And I'm all out of bubblegum.
Hal Sparks.
All right, let's do this.
Johnny Million, welcome, my good friend. Hello, Chicago. Hello, everybody out there in the interwebs. I think they're still called. And across the globe, this is Hal Sparks.
They're called the interwebs.
Radio program, Mega Worldwide. Also a podcast, the Hal Sparks Podcast, Mega Worldwide. Sign up today. Also have a Substack, the Hal Sparks Substack, Mega Worldwide. I'm getting this branding thing down, Johnny Million. I really am.
I don't see where you're headed with this.
Okay, well, I happen to think that, weren't you in a band called The Millions at one point?
I was.
There you go. I think I rest my case. I think you're just as keen on this whole branding thing as I am. Now, sometimes, sometimes you need a rebrand, Johnny Million. Sometimes you gotta rebuild from scratch, right? Because maybe, I don't know, the brand got associated Blackwater with government graft and horrible atrocities, and so you decide to switch its name to the last name of the leader of China for some reason that no one can quite figure out. And sometimes you screw up so bad that nobody wants to buy what you're selling anymore, but they would under a different name, because it's not the thing that's the problem, it's the association they have with the name. And sometimes you switch over, you go, you have New Coke, and you go, that was a mistake. Coke was just fine. Maybe we had a new Coke, but we didn't have to tell everybody it was New Coke. Maybe they'd have just drank it. Right? Maybe.
I think about that more often than I probably should.
Right. Well,
New Coke have worked if they had just changed it.
Shut up
about it.
Right. Well, there is a rebranding that is occurring that we could all see coming, and I got to say there are very few stories kind of over the sort of the recent past that really make me grind my teeth, as it were. I mean, there's obviously a lot of things to be concerned about what Trump's doing. A lot of it is flailing and big noise. So I'm not getting as worried about some of these things until, he crosses a genuine red line, or we know. Because again, I think one of the ways that they gain control of the narrative is making everybody panic. And I think Democrats have a tendency, especially right now, because they're making these big, bold strides in these executive orders, which again are not laws, aren't changing anything, are still under the Constitution, are questionable, all that kind of stuff. And they will meet challenges, and those challenges will be fought in federal court. And there's not a lot of evidence that even Trump's POTUS would give him certain powers over the House and the Senate. And if he does have it, then the responsibility for the budget overruns are entirely administrative. So there's even reason why in the White House you want somebody to blame. You want to be able to outsource your budget requests to the House and the Senate and go, well, they couldn't get it passed, but if my magic bill had gotten passed, everything would be great. That's a big part of Trump's storyline, right?
Yeah.
But there are some folks. I mean, again, as those things show up, and if there is a genuine line cross where there's activity we can take that will make an impact on these circumstances besides actually voting next time, ladies and gentlemen, Hal, are you vote shaming? Yeah, I am. Yeah. Especially when it comes to there's a group. Most people do people know the Prince story about why he changed his name to a symbol? You think they know the story? that Warner Brothers.
I don't know if they do anymore. Like you and I know it because it was a pretty big deal when it happened.
It was not crazy at all. It was super smart. At that time,
it was a legal sidestep.
Yes, Warner Brothers owned the right to Prince Rogers Nelson, Prince in the New Power Generation, and Prince in the Revolution because of the contract. Anything that he toured under up to that point where he'd separated from the contract, they owned all those names, which meant all of his albums, if he just puts his name on the album, he doesn't get credit. He doesn't get paid. Nope. And so he basically gave a big one-handed symbol to the record company and said, I don't even need a name. I just use a symbol. Right? And he did it. Yep. And it was genius. It was marketing genius. It also, had an element of sigil magic to it. We'll talk about that on a sidecar episode sometimes. If you don't know what sigil magic is, there's a Grant Morrison video waiting for you. He's the comic book artist behind Arkham Asylum, the Arkham Asylum storyline and the Joker and all that kind of stuff that led to all the movies you've seen.
If you're a fan of the MCU and the series Agatha All Along, there's a big thing about a sigil in there. Yeah,
that's Grant. So, and his speech at the Disinfo conference explains to you how to do sigil magic if you want to. And that's part of all this stuff. But the key was, what did the rest of the world do? They went, well, we can't pronounce this thing, so we'll start calling them the artist formerly known as Prince. And that aggravated the heck out of the Warner executives who were trying to trap him. And it was a genius ploy. It really was. Yeah. And I don't want to sully the artist formerly known as thing, which became a punchline after that fact. After Prince was able to regain his name. It still is. You can still use that in general. But there's a group, the artists formerly known as Arab Americans for Trump, who are largely responsible for about somewhere between 7,500 and 13,000 votes in Michigan and in Minnesota and a couple other states, like each, that arguably gave Trump a couple of these swing states. They were the tipping point. And the people that they were convincing, who were not necessarily Arab Americans, but leaned towards, being supportive of a Palestinian state, in theory, sympathized with the Arab Americans for Trump and what they were selling. And not different from Blacks for Trump. In the chat, they're going, what about Blacks for Trump? Blacks for Trump is actually a pseudo-Moorish or almost a sovereign citizen group of black supremacists that, and I'm not kidding, the Blacks for Trump guy and all those guys you saw behind him believe that Oprah and Barack Obama and Denzel Washington and Samuel L. Jackson are not black. They are Cherokees and Indian, like East Indian hybrids that are here to remove the real blacks that were here before white people and Native Americans arrived. I'm not kidding. Wow. Okay, so that's what that guy believes. He's not rebranding, though, I would like to say for the record. He is not rebranding. That's Blacks for Trump is still Blacks for Trump because it was always baloney, so why bother? But Arab Americans for Trump have changed their name, kids, to Arab Americans for Peace. And why did they do that? Well, I think largely to hide the fact that they were either suckered by Trump or willing participants in the destruction of the potential for a Palestinian state. No one lives under the illusion that any group of people, be it the Germans and the Poles, or Texans and Mexicans during a certain period in American history, or, for God's sake, Sunni and Shia, are automatically on the same side because they are racially the same group, or they, in theory, fall under the same religion, okay? Technically speaking, Protestants and Catholics are both of the Christian Abrahamic tradition, but they've had a couple of rough spots ask Ireland, right? So the idea that just because you're technically Christian, for example, that you would automatically side with other Christians. Obviously there were a bunch of Christian FBI agents who had a real issue with what the Branch Davidians were doing behind closed doors. See what I mean? It's not an automatic, but there's an assumption, oftentimes on our side of the aisle, that because the attacks come with a broad brush from the right, that the defense must come with a broad brush from the left. And so we ran interference for this, this kind of blanket idea, Arabs supporting Arabs, when in reality, there's no reason. I mean, Russians and Ukrainians are genetically very similar. Arguably, their Orthodox Church comes from the same line. They're kind of having a problem right now. And you don't automatically trust the Russians to think about what's best for the Ukrainians, no matter how much you couldn't tell them apart in a lineup. And we are learning that I think that the Arab Americans for Trump, in changing their name to Arab Americans for Peace, is a dodge to cover either their culpability and gullibility in the lead up, which I can't believe, because just listen to his words and know that whatever he's doing, it will be more racist than what he said. Or their willing participation in this exact thing. We got to take a break. We'll be back right after this. But I immediately heard they changed their name to Arab Americans for Peace. And the only phrase that popped into my head was from Monty Python Life of Brian. Besides the aqueduct, public health, public irrigation, and security, what have they given us? Peace. Oh, peace. Shut up. We'll be back. You remember that? You remember Oh, and by the way, the anti-Indian, East Indian track in Blacks for Trump is why they were for him and not her, because they don't see her as black, they see her as Indian. And they think that there has been this big push. You know how Tucker Carlson believes in the great replacement theory of white people by, Hispanics from South America, and that this is all a big ploy and all that stuff? Okay. The Blacks for America think that about Indian people, that they're the palatable blacks.
Thank you.
I'm not kidding. I went through at one point and read this dude's whole page, and I had to stop at one point because at the videos he posted, because they were so violent and gross.
Yeah.
It reads like somebody's manifesto that they put, right before they turned the gun on themselves. Yeah, it's bad, but it makes sense, right? It's consistently nutty.
Tracks.
Yep. We're coming back.
Nothing.
Yeah.
2 seconds.
Okay, thank you.
Now, back to Hal Sparks on Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT.
Every time,
I'm tired of being right.
it's brutal some days. Like, that is the burden. Like, we're so in the I told you so phase, and we're not even there yet. Like, the ramifications of a lot of what, Trump is going to be able to coast on the economy from the Biden administration for the next probably 3 to 6 months to some degree, depending on if he really throws a monkey wrench into things like he did with his tariff threats and the effect that it had on the market. And again, the effect it had on the market, because the market is so far up and everybody believes it's primed for a correction anyways, that they're all pricing in a weird drastic drop that comes back up anyways. Look at the temporary freak out about DeepSeek, the Chinese AI, which we now know was just built on top of ChatGPT. They basically took ChatGPT, used it to extend the reasoning model that ChatGPT's been working on, that their current one is far better even than that one. And they just trained it to forget everything bad that China ever did. Right? You can't go to their app and ask it about Tiananmen Square because it will just say China never did anything wrong. The model itself won't say that if you download it, if you dare, because the density of the programming in it of the actual like model itself is a little scary. So the idea, I downloaded it onto a Raspberry Pi, so it's isolated from the rest of my stuff, and I don't even connect it to the network when I'm testing it. It is. It's the Raspberry Pis are scrumptious, but it's a little single computer board that you can use. Whatever. Anyways, I'm nerding out lately. It's one of my ways of meditating in these current crazy times. But so Victor Blackwell had this guy Bashar Baba. Isn't there an elephant book about a? No, okay.
How many?
Two B's.
How many B's in that?
One. Two. BABR. That's two. Yeah, but not right next to each other. I thought that's what you meant. He goes, the last time you were on, the name of your group was Arab Americans for Trump. You changed it this week after those announcements about Gaza. Do you no longer support the president? Well, Arab Americans for Trump was created to help President Trump win the election. Really? Really? Baba replied. We wanted an end to the war in Gaza primarily, and the president also promised us a lasting peace in the Middle East that is satisfactory to all parties. Now, this is the point I've been trying to make, kids, that he ran as Santa Claus. And no matter what you do, you're going to step on the rake of disappointment when you do that. Now, in some cases, he doesn't care. The way he will get around that rake is that he will never step in that direction again because it was always a lie. It was always a flim-flam. It was always meant to be a sales pitch that was never going anywhere. It's why he talks about these kind of programs or these situations or these peace deals like construction projects that he's going to launch once you give him the money. It's the same language he used about his casino and Trump steaks and Trump Airlines and his football team. It's the same words. Big, beautiful, bold, strong. It's like he's got a thesaurus that only has like a machismo, like a faux machismo chapter in it. So based on those two promises,
some people
he goes,
say it's the best in the world.
That's right, exactly. And it's going to be even better because I think it's going to be even bigger than we say. Like, we're building a 20-story building here, but I think it's going to actually, we'll be able to do 30. I think we're going to be able to do 30. Like, and it never ends up being 18, and it's the old building, and all they did was buy some new furniture that he got on, wholesale from like some Italian friends downtown. Really is how most of his hotels worked out, right? So this is continuing a quote from this guy, Baba Black Sheep. Based on those two promises, we lent the president our vote. Okay. That languaging, that dodge is frigging embarrassing. We lent the president our vote. No, you didn't. You didn't say Arab Americans for Peace before, and then Arab Americans for Peace voted for Trump because they were driving this. They named the organization Arab Americans for Trump well before. I mean, he was never for a two-state solution. And every time you brought up the subject, the Palestinians either regarded them as the problem you have to solve quickly or a cancer. There was never a point where he's like, these poor people. Now he's playing at that whole thing, right? He's playing at that like, these poor people, they can't live there. Nobody can live there. We're going to have to move everybody out, and they don't want to come back. Other people will live there. We'll move the UN there, right? That's basically what he's saying. He's going to United Colors of Benetton. Everybody but the Palestinians will get to live in Gaza. That's the plan. It's a development thing. He wants the Israeli version of Dubai there. That's what they think they're going to build. I'm not kidding. That's why he says the Riviera of the Middle East, which is what like right-wingers have said about the amount of money we have poured into Gaza to support these people over the years. They could have built the Riviera of the Middle East. That's the line that was used for the last 2 years. So he goes, now when he started suggesting that relocating Gazans, which is against international law, against Palestinian interests, against the continuity of a Palestinian state between the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, we could not come out with a statement under the title of Arab Americans for Trump. First of all, we're not a cult. Secondly, we want peace. We started supporting the president because we wanted peace. As a result, we changed the name. I gotta say, man, there's a reason they call it a brand. The reason that, it's one of the reasons why I would rather be legendary than have a brand. There's the legend of Hal Sparks. I don't have a brand. I use consistent names across stuff. But what's the brand of George Carlin other than truth teller? He wasn't the guy known for the one bit, right? And that's always the struggle when you're an actor or an artist, a musician, right? Unless you're a single genre thing, it's too limiting a gimmick, right? Thank you, the Sockster in the chat. So, and by the way, hit that like, share the show. It annoys maggots around you. But we lent the president our vote stands out as just really embarrassing. No, you didn't. You branded yourself as being supportive of this guy. The man, not Arab Americans for a peaceful future, for Arab Americans, vote peace or vote true, vote right, even vote conservative Arab American coalition, right? You could have done that.
Yeah.
CARC, sure. Conservative Arab Americans for right-wing policy, CARP. Okay, but CARP, YARP. So he goes, first of all, we're not a cult. Secondly, we want peace. Okay, well, maybe that was the problem. Maybe secondly, you wanted peace. Maybe that was second to your perception of the achievement of alignment of power. Maybe that was the problem. Maybe you were trying to saddle up to what you thought was a strong man in a strong man situation. And I have heard so much tap dancing over the last little bit of the people who supported Trump, voted for him, and them calling this an about face. That he has turned on the Palestinians. He has turned on Gaza. No, he has not. He's doing, and this is the thing that Democrats need to stop saying. No one voted for this. Yeah, you did. Yes, not Democrats, but Republicans absolutely voted for this. The Arab Americans for Trump don't get to pretend now that they didn't vote for this, because they absolutely did. His languaging did not change. He didn't say, I got to bring everybody to the table. He was saying October 7th never would have happened. Why? Because they would have been afraid to do it. That's what he meant. And it was abundantly clear that that's the talk he was using. So the idea that they're like, we didn't know he was going to do this. Yes, you did. And until people feel a depth of shame for being, for thinking the rest of us are gullible enough to believe that they voted this way out of innocent naivete, until they, because it wasn't their gullibility that's at question, it's ours. I don't buy it. I think we're all aboard on this, and I think that it's a matter of gravy. Like, at this point, they just know they can't make money off the same rights groups or whoever was feeding money into them by pretending to be, by calling themselves Arab Americans for Trump. And they're not alone. This is an example. We got to take a break. We'll be back right after this. It's the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide. Philip Ittner will be joining us from Kyiv in the next hour. But man, this is a constant problem. You should have to stay with your political brand. We'll be back. So you say that, Blackwell had said in this, so you say the president told you in your response, so you say that the president told you in your response to saying that you're in this for the two-state solution 100%. Do you think the president lied to you? And this guy goes, it remains to be seen. Oof.
Oh, really?
Sorry, the jury's still out on he floated this, then it ended up in his permanent remarks, and then Caroline Leavitt repeated it, and now the State Department has been given a directive that this is what they're going to do. And again, At that point, it is not about whether or not these people were suckers or stupid or gullible at some point. It's whether we are.
60 seconds, gents.
Thank you. Because I knew better. You knew better, Johnny. Everybody in our chat room knew better. Nobody was like, maybe he's the guy. Maybe he could finally bring about peace in the Middle East. Oh, God. Really? And now, like, we had no idea. Yes, you did. You at least had some idea, and you either actively ignored it or you were on board the whole time.
Hey, Damon.
Yeah. Damon and Foster. They get to run around in there now? What the kitties? Hi, buddy.
Damon made his debut yesterday by climbing that curtain behind me all the way to the top and then falling to his doom.
Aw, kitties.
I think he learned a lesson.
I don't think he did. I think he's looking at it right now, and he's like, I can make it next time. So handsome. Look at him making little biscuits a little bit.
Welcome back to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
Johnny Million is petting one of his new kitties, whose name is Demon. And I'm kidding. It's Damon, which is actually where the name Demon comes from, which is rooted in, I believe, the word for intellect, which is, again, leads back to that whole tree of knowledge thing, and apparently that being bad. And obviously, the tree of knowledge, the fruit has not fallen far from the tree in terms of Damon climbing the curtains behind Johnny Million, falling, and he thinks he's learned his lesson. I don't think so. I think if you put him down,
he landed hard.
Yep, he's going to give it another try.
Like, what was that about? Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. There have been a bunch of areas where Republicans. So Trump last week, I don't know how many people know this, but Trump last week, they had a bunch of Republicans over because they can't decide in the House whether to have one bill or two, and the Senate wants one bill, just get it done. They don't want to deal with budgetary pressures in the first 6 months of the presidency. They think that if they have a budget fight by addressing real budgetary issues like Trump has, talked about, like Doge is talking about, and all this stuff, all the flappery they've given about cutting the budget. There's two problems they run into, and this kind of links to Trump's issue with Tom Homan right now. It's a very similar issue. So if you don't know, Trump is apparently enraged at Tom Homan right now that he's not deporting enough. It's Foster. Named after, he's got both of them. Johnny's double fisting kitties while I'm trying to have a very, the first step is admitting you have a problem. Right. So, Tom, for those of you who don't know, Tom Homan's deportation numbers of murderers and rapists and monsters and all that kind of stuff are right in line with Biden's numbers and Obama's numbers. And as much as they've been running around with Dr. Phil, rounding up one dude in a house, statistically, they got a real problem. He didn't promise people that they would go on a bug hunt running around finding people that might have evaded the system or were charged with something in another country, and then you found out about it later, and so they're on they're on release and they have an ankle bracelet and they shouldn't, and you're second guessing local judges and that kind of stuff. That wasn't the promise. The promise from Trump was the biggest deportation ever, named after Eisenhower's. It was that times 10. It was originally times 2 and then times 5, and they have promised that there are 22 to 25 million illegals in the country. There are about 10.
Oh, my.
And one would think, if you have those kind of numbers, the roundups would be pretty easy, right? Wouldn't it? I mean, that kind of thing, you know exactly where they are. They're either working in sweatshops or factories or in agriculture, or they're in rough parts of town where they're, taking up apartments that belong to Americans, whatever the story they've been telling, right? Follow the taco trucks was almost the idea that they were presenting, right? We're going to ask the local sheriff, follow the taco trucks, we'll find all the illegals, and there's going to be tens of thousands of them just taking up apartment blocks that are meant for real Americans, right? That was the story. Where are they? Well, the problem that they have, and one of the solutions that Trump is no doubt going to come up with, is that half of them don't exist. That the number is fluctuating and it's gone down just like every other demographic number. And even with the encounters at the southern border, the reality of people getting into the country, fairly static. They had more asylum cases. We had an asylum problem, not an immigration problem in this country, because the standard by which you could claim asylum was such that you could talk your way through it. And in an emergency like COVID or something like that, there are a lot more people who can genuinely seek asylum. And so if you fudge those numbers or move them around at all, or change your language enough, you can at least get a hearing. And that the system, because we don't have enough lawyers, we don't have enough judges in the system, can drag out your asylum claim for a few years, maybe long enough to where you go back to your own country after the current unpleasantness has ended, which happened a lot as well. So a lot of people came here after COVID, were here for about 2.5 years, and then went home once things settled. The rest of the thing was just kind of this overturning, again, encounters, not individuals. A lot of recidivism at the border. You'd see the same person coming across, 4 or 5 times. The average person had crossed 3 times and were rejected again. So there isn't this big crop of people to pull. And the quote is, "It's driving him nuts." Trump reportedly angry over border czar's deportation numbers. President Donald Trump is furious that his administration isn't deporting as many immigrants as he had promised his voters it would. Now, the issue he has with the whole 20 million number, the 25 million number, is that it is an extraordinary number. It's a lot of people. That's why he kept boosting it all the time, because it was like a dopamine hit, right? These, they're everywhere. The same 8 guys at the Home Depot parking lot that most people reference, right? It didn't suddenly go from 8 guys hanging around the parking lot to 65 to 110, which is what it would have to be for these kind of numbers to be real, right? So one of the things he's going to do is go the census numbers that will come out in the spring, or they'll do some sort of polling that we only have 11 million people in there. See, I already got rid of half of them. You didn't even see them go. They left on their own. They just got scared and ran off. You're seeing this in the stories about ghost towns, that Chicago is becoming a ghost town. Like, people are leaving, and these entire areas of the city are completely vacant because the immigrants have bugged out, right? New York, you hear the same story. Now, materially on the ground, is that true? No. Are some people leaving? Sure. But the idea that, everybody scattered from a job site like cockroaches when the lights are turned on, which is the story that they keep telling. Is that the case? No. We have more jobs than we have available workers. That's still true, even with this alleged giant number of immigrants that were here. So Homan's problem is that he wasn't, the promise made that they want a promise kept isn't, that he's going to go through and make sure you find the Lake and Riley murderers that are lurking in everybody's neighborhood. Because the ICE and Customs and Border Patrol and local prosecutors, they do that anyways. That's always the thing. Every administration, when they're dealing with immigration, we're talking about trying to get immigration reform passed, any of this stuff, the language, everybody, same thing. Our priority is violent felons and dangerous people and drug dealers and that kind of stuff. Everybody. Biden said it. Trump said it the first time. He's saying it now. Homan's saying it right now. Obama said it or whatever, because the idea is that agribusiness and construction need all these workers and they can't find them anywhere else. So just leave us alone for a couple of years until the fever breaks. And if you just make a big show of running out some bad guys and tell us some stories about them, then we'll be okay with it. Maybe everybody will leave us alone. He didn't promise that. Trump in his exaggeration, his hyperbole habit, his addiction to hyperbole, did not promise. Yeah, he can't not. Did not promise that we're going to get the really bad people out. That's the same thing everybody says. And it's the same thing everybody does. He promised the biggest deportation in American history on day one. Well, guess what? 3 weeks in, Homan, who previously served as Trump's acting director of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, has become notorious for making the rounds on TV to vow harsh and decisive action on immigration at the border. This is from NBC News. He stirred controversy by suggesting whole families should be deported even if the children were U.S. citizens, and threatened Democratic mayors with arrest if they stood in the way. But Trump is nonetheless unsatisfied with his work output, meaning his inability to pull off a papers, please law in America. A source familiar with Trump's thinking said the president is getting angry that more people are not being deported and that the messages being passed along to the border czar, Tom Homan. White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller and Acting ICE Director Caleb Vitello reported Kristen Welker and Julia Ainsley. One source told NBC, it's driving him nuts they're not deporting more people. Homan himself is feeling unhappy with the relatively low numbers, too, said the report. Meanwhile, Vitello told agents in January to aim to meet a daily quota of 1,200 to 1,400 arrests. But so far, the highest number they've managed in one day was 1,100. That's because the people aren't here. It was always baloney. So they're not there to be found. It would be a difficult job taking 1 million of the 10 million people that are here illegally out of the country. The act of doing that costs somewhere in the order of $80 billion. That just the law enforcement activity, rounding them up, putting them on a bus, holding them for a little while, operating, with the, dealing with the country that they're going to, finding their country of origin, verifying it so you're not just dropping some dude off, the way Trump wants to, is like, well, they look Hispanic. Any country in South America should do. Right? It doesn't work that way. And one of the reasons why these planes get turned around is they get the manifest in the country that's receiving them and go, that guy's Venezuelan. Does he know the difference between Venezuela and Guatemala? Right? This isn't our citizen. We can't take this dude. And until we can verify the rest of them, turn the plane around. But they're not doing that work because he's just doing slapdash work because he thinks he can do this quickly without. Again, it's this move fast, break things idea that works really well when you're creating apps like Candy Crush in Silicon Valley, but when people's lives are on the line, it fails miserably. Move fast, break things is great when your company just, when it's whatever, Hell's Kitchen, that's, that show where the guy comes in and, bar